right. Chapter 8. Chapter 8. Here we go. Here we go. In Secreto. In Secreto. So, I am your host and author, Connor Barvet, and I'm getting excited because we are reaching the well-deserved end of this book. Not in a bad way. This is good. This is good. I'm excited to get to my other books on this platform. Kind of get some of this stuff out there. In Secreto, if you haven't already, go check out the character introductions. And if you've been following up with the audiobooks, this chapter leads off of where Alita and Jim were fighting last. And so this is post-fight from Informe and Grimm. If you don't remember, Grimm had defeated Informe, and while they were clashing sword to claw, Alita and Jim were clashing magic to shield. So this is where it's going to lead off of, but again, if you haven't already, leave a like. It really does help spread the algorithm, and I want to make sure that this actually gets out to new readers. I want to hear some feedback, some comments. I really do enjoy that. So stay tuned. The ebook will be coming out. I'm still going through some copyright stuff and formatting, but after that, it's going to be game on. So not to waste too much time, let's just get right into the book. Pretty excited. Chapter 8 in Secreto. Coming to this world was quite benign and tranquil. I don't remember much from where I was pulled from, but I faintly can feel the remnants calling me forward from that higher love. This was new to me, and having a body and position with such purpose was nice. Grimm is my master I serve, and I've never been more pleased to assist and nurture such a lost spirit. What troubles me, though, is the part of him that is of a dark and unclean nature. Being bound to Grimm gives him the ability to contain the shadow in him and keep it at bay from consuming his life force completely. This must never happen, and I will never allow something or someone to harm him. Daily, in every moment, I am keeping it at bay. The servitude to him goes beyond the bond we have and why this newfound purpose was given to me by Jem. I can feel the lost history dwelling from within me, calling me from a distant plane that I can't quite reach in my current state. All memory of the places I've been and the things I've done were stripped from me as I came into Jim's golem bust. The picture I found is familiar to me, and I must not let Grimm know about my discomforts because I don't even really know what to believe. There must be writings within the mansion's library about what I could be or could have been. For now, I am lost in the fray with Jim and am moved by her words that she spoke to Master Grimm. She will pay for a notion of that magnitude and trust Master Grimm will be able to deal with Informe in the horrid state that Jim allowed her to become. The small moments I had with Jim were uneasy and felt unnatural. She crafted me for a purpose, but I think the purpose was truly for something else. What that is still a mystery to me. Jim seemed to me to be almost relieved to bound my life force to the golem. What she does not know is that I am the life force of the wand and not just a blind homunculus stuck in the golem's body being commanded by Grimm's every thought. She must have known what to do with such an artifact, but what troubled me with her decisions to craft me was her motive. Yeah, Grimm is now relieved of his burden, and she's now capable of having more time and mana to herself. Yet when I observe her, she seems to have done it for a selfish reason. What reason that may be has yet to reveal itself. He and I train on a daily basis for her own vendetta against an ash demon for some reason and says that she needs its blood before cast exercised. Grimm seems to have recovered well from his encounter with such a powerful ash demon, but he got lucky with his encounter. I've had plenty of time to observe the courtyard, now covered in vines and moss with the flowers blooming again, and have found that the demon was sent or somehow spawned here, not being summoned as Jim had us believe. Telling from the residue and the disturbed arcade within the fortress they call a home, I can tell it either leaked from a source from within the house, or it was sent here from a very powerful being. Nevertheless, its source was from within the home's confines. As I sink my trainings and experience upon, I see this point with fighting with Sister Grimm, all of it seems too suspicious in my opinion. Though all of that will have to wait. Her and I are demonstrating our power right now, and they certainly are conflicting with each other. While I watch Sister Jem take a direct hit from my weapon of my own design, she seemed to almost be unfazed. So I had to follow the attack with a shield bash in a brute-forced manner. Her tactical analyzing is almost uncanny to keep up with. While I followed her skid marks in the prairie, I saw the trees bowing in her presence as she came forward. She was at least 30 feet high off the ground, emanating pure essence of purple power. Her eyes were bloodshot with a purple sigil inferno behind them, all waiting to set its gaze on me. Grinning, she approached the open grass prairie where I stood in vigilance. The grin was not one of benevolence, but one of malevolence. Just as fast as my eyes were fixated on her, she vanished behind me already with staff in hand, sending a violent barrage of shards of molten obsidian and rock that would burst into 1,000 different shards before impact. Slamming my shield into the ground, I knelt, absorbing its ferocious encumbrance. I summoned my giant long spear, dashing backwards to get a strong throw. Taking a deep breath, like in training, I focused all of my energy into my body. Using my shield, I threw it forward as a counterweight to hurtle the massive spear of light towards her. When it left my hand, it scorched the space around it, consequently catching my sigils on my sleeves aflame, condensing the air and pushing a wave of force in front of it to follow. The spear ripped through the dark and nasty storm clouds above, splitting the tapestry of rain with an open space only to erupt in a cloud, lighting it up behind her. She evaded the throw with great ease this time, and then raised her hand in front of her forcefully with another evil grin upon her face. She spoke to it and started assembling a sigil in the air, so I quickly started running in their direction to break her concentration, and stopped her from casting her next spell. She would do this commonly in training, and I will admit she is not one to let thoroughly think through the process of a devastating magical spell of this magnitude. As I'm blazing through the tall grass and watching the great display of complex spellcasting, I start to source another spear for a weapon. Being in a defensive mode will not defeat her, and she is up there for a reason. She knows that if I tried to bash her from the ground upward, I'd be left vulnerable the second she moves out of the way. She and Informe are used to me disrupting their unclean spells so much in training that they've developed counters to each move, but this time it's just her, so I must think of something to do before I reach a point of exhaustion. Unfortunately, I cannot gesture nor chant spells. Grimm can do many spells at once when he is in a pinch, but I could never master my arcade like that. Something in me is seeking transformation, I just haven't found my raison d'etre. I thrust myself forward with a great strike at the ground with my shield, launching myself into the air with the prepared spear in hand. My body becomes elegant in its propulsion forward, and I release my spear of Lux at her atrocity. This time, I started to tear a layer of my arm off the top from the force, increasing the temperature of the air around it because of the radiation. The spear hitting the sigil dead on, It shot back without destroying the large cast, as if traveling through a vortex right back at me with even greater destructive power and speed, spewing purple aura from its now unclean nature. The spear impales me, sending me into the same tree line I sent her. The trees glowing purple from a wall-like net to make the impact greater, stopping me midair. The hit broke the constant flow of rain with a massive spherical burst. The rain settling back into its descent, hitting flowing down my hair as I hung impaled by my own spear. She came up to me face to face with that despicable smile of hers. Now that's what you get for thinking you could land a couple blows on me. How does it feel to be useless, slave? Maybe I should have made you with a little more reason to live. She grabbed the spear's handle, twisting it and pushing it through the other side of the wall of trees I was impaled on, laughing manically while she did it. A massive burst of blood came oozing out of the wound, kissing the ground with a puddle of pain and mistakes. She then grabbed the top of my head with a handful of hair, making me meet where my eyes would be with hers. After I'm done murdering my brother, I will come back and deal with you, she said, spitting in my face and making her way back in the air onward to Master Grimm. As furious as I was, I couldn't even bear to move with the amount of pain I was in. All the memories of Grimm came flashing in and out of my mind, fueling my hatred towards her. I could feel the rain hitting the top of my head, and the sounds started to calm me. I closed my eyes, retraining my composure, and adjusted my energy to my inner self, trying my best to ignore the situation and the amounts of blood that was pouring onto the dirt below. Taking a breath, I raised my hand, making contact with the handle of the spear. I grabbed the handle, screaming in pain, allowing the memory of Grimm's safe passage in the road of darkness, and freed myself from my own doing, falling a great distance to the ground. My body coming to a thud on the ground, spear still in hand, with a splash of the puddle of my own blood mixing with the purity of the rain. Using it as a crutch to my feet, I hold my hand over my wound, healing it instantly with an unknown knowledge that I didn't even know I could do that. Tightening my shoulder armor, once more I summon my shield to my side, raising my head, redeemed from my ignorance and failed ability to protect my master. I wield the spear with great gusto and yell, "Gem, you will pay for this!" Suddenly, the tip of the double-bladed spear started to emit a small orb, gaining mass, bending the light around it. The growing sphere began to take orbit around her, and one by one, until 9 spheres orbit around Alita. Standing tall, she retracted her shield into a different formation on her back. The shield became like one of a mirror, and uniform like a tall shield. The top of it with 2 arcs that lumbered down to the very tip, reflecting all behind it in a golden shimmer. Alita became surrounded by a mirror-esque shimmer and formed armor around her. Starting at her feet, the armor resembled what she has read about in the books that were on Grimm's shelves, the fictional tales of fantasy. She read about wonderful tales of dragons and knights with a long-lost maiden that was locked up in a high-towering apex of coincidence. Her armor became like one of the knights with great burly presence, creating an angelic cage around her. Spectacles of light radiated gold shimmer. Now Alita's form was complete. The stress of the battle, and all that has happened up to this point, has now become like one of a cocoon beckoning metamorphosis. Beckoning her to seek light in the darkness and to stand tall without resistance of her mistakes. Alida gazed at her armor, fingers gripping them tight. Her eyes, now visible, radiated a pure gold glow, lips of lush and tinted gold, with her hair that flowed from the large, armored body flowing freely in two massive braids. Light curls of a golden shore glistens, warm with the sun's vital kiss at the ends of the massive braids. She dug into the needle-covered ground and took flight with a large whoosh. Spreading her strong, lightly armored wings, they continued to grow in size, stoically surfing the airstream in Jem's directions. Alida, coming to the realization of her new self, became even more focused on her objective to stop Jem and protect Grim at all costs. Soaring through the cloud line to reach a high altitude, she broke through the cloud's fog and came to an opening between the clouds. Her eyes, much more keen, can see that Jem will reach Grim in any moment. He is pacing in anticipation, sword in hand, ready to clash with a worthy opponent, tired from Informe's prior form, with a focused expression compared to Sister Jem's devilish smile. Gripping her spear tightly, thinking intently that she wanted to protect Grim at all costs, she burst in a blast of light illuminating the clouds, dispersing the storm, along with it flashing in front of Grim, spear wielding itself, steady at Jem. Her wings held at great lengths to her sides, and her shield at her grasp, ready for a demonly encounter. Jem was stunned by the storm's dispersal and squinting at the glowing light show, caught in disbelief with eyes set on Alida, barely capable of opening her eyes just by the sight of Alida's new form. She came to a slow trot in the sky, but now in a frightening way. Jem started clapping, and her violent perplexity faded away along with her intent to kill. Congratulations, Alida. You have found your next phase in your development. Jem saying from a respectful distance still. Alida was still in battle stance, but starting to calm her senses. Realizing that the training was over, her armor again shaped itself, conforming her body and turning back into the gold-gilded yukata, but something caught Grim's eye. The yukata was white, but now not of a fabric of man, that was very clear, but one that could only be described of an angel. Her eyes, nova-like and bursting green, now out of her giant armored form, twirled her spear and stabbed it into the ground, releasing golden sparks and flames. Her wings retract in a fashion tattoo on her back that stretched around her entire self as her yukata fashioned itself back on her. The orbs circling around her spun and separated into two different sigils resting on her hands. She turned and looked at Grim with her eyes and knelt to his honor and safety. She rose and grabbed her spear, returning it back into its original form and tucking it under her yukata's sash. Grim stood gazing at her eye for a moment, with blood still dripping from his head, and broke the silence, dropping his sword that thud to the ground with a sudden hug. Alida, you teleported! Holy shit! This was amazing, and you could fly? I thought you were seriously injured when Sister Jem used your weapon against you. Grim stumbled to the ground, using his sheath as a crutch to stand tall for Alida. I am so glad you're okay, Grim said in an excitement. All three of them walked home that night in exhaustion and ready for a complete meal. Informe was carried home by Jem, petting her the entire way, almost embarrassed by being so violent to us. Not one of them spoke a word the entire journey back through the deathly silent forest. Their clashes and fighting had hushed the surrounding perimeter of any darkly creatures. Over a ridge, their house's giant courtyard peeked through the dark. The suns started rising, casting a gorgeous orange to red tint through the walkway up to the mansion's tall towers, and they made their way into the house, struggling to open the doors. All of them making themselves comfortable at the dinner table ready for food, but all of them coming to the realization that one of them had to cook. Grim sighed and limped, and still using a sheath as a cane, leaving his sword lying against the booth table, over to the kitchen and wiped some dry blood from his forehead and threw massive slices of bacon on the flat top, followed by a mixture of vegetables that were foreign to the planet from the garden room. While the vegetables cooked, he sliced some bread that Jem makes from her special grasses. Eggs soon sizzled on the fatty flat top, and the smell of food was the only thing that could satisfy this training. Green onions found their way on the cutting board to top the massive eggs on the plates, enriching the aesthetic of the meal. Grabbing some jars of Jem's personal cabinet, it surprisingly contained a lot of jams and jellies. Some of them gave a presence of death, but many were radiant and worthy of trying. I grabbed a retro pineapple and jalapeno and smeared it on her bread. The smell of blood filled the air because of all my wounds, but one thing was certain: the food was almost worth it. Jem's words still were hurting my insides, almost more than the actual wounds, though. Serving the ladies first, Grim sat down next to Alita with both of them facing Jem. Jem started eating like she's never eaten before, enjoying the jam-covered toast with her own bread. That set the tone for the other two to start eating their fill. Thick cut bacon seared in peppercorns and topped with a bed of grasses from the garden and flat cakes to top off the meal. The eggs soon filled the plate of all of us and were being devoured more than usual. The meal had almost erased the fact that we had all just tried to kill each other, and that mattered most was our ability to fill our stomachs as much as possible. After breakfast, Jem went off to her bedroom to soak in her potions and rest, tending to Informe's weakened state. Alita and I cleaned up breakfast and walked up to our room. I limped my way over to the shower room, still dripping blood, and leaned on the furniture made of a fine mineral while the water washed my blood off. Had to get some coffee. The red bled from the stone as I was resting on it, and it reminded me of the training. Flashes of the warfare went in and out of my mind. The action of these new stresses have been hard and difficult to keep up with, but I want to be strong for her. Alita is always there to protect me, and she's now reached her next level of transformation. But when will I be strong enough to reach mine? I will never truly reach my true form, will I? I'm sure I can't even sustain the presence of my sword. My sword moved roughly against the wall, and within its sheath it shined a great bright light, and suddenly flashing off, dispersing the idea of that from my mind. Pondering these thoughts for some time, I eventually went to my bed after tucking Alita in. I was reaching over to turn my light off, remembering the picture that Alita dropped. I groaned as I leaned forward and placed it in her arms. The fireplace crackled and cast dancing shadows across the room as I sat next to her. I chuckled as I looked at her peaceful slumber, with the picture of my mother and I in her hands. A tear dropped, and I returned to my bed to finally find my rest. And that concludes In Secreto. I hope you enjoyed it. We are reaching the very end of the book, but Chapter 9 is a long one. It's one of the longer chapters, so stay tuned. Again, if you're enjoying this content, leave a like. It really does help with the algorithm and get it out there to new readers, and that's kind of my goal. That's the whole point why I wanted to start the channel. So stay tuned for Chapter 9, and we will end this book together. So thanks again, guys. Have a good rest of your day.